Well, in 1977, I was 18 years old and I got pregnant. And I was terrified. I did not want to be the token pregnant girl in my high school. I did not want my parents to know I'd been sexually active. I didn't want to have to face what I was facing. And so I panicked. And in that panic, I decided to have an abortion. And it's kind of contradictory because I was raised in the church and I had actually sent in $5 to get a pro life bracelet. And I actually wore that bracelet to my first abortion. And the reason I say it's contradictory is because you may hold really strong beliefs about whether abortion is right or wrong. And then when you're faced with it, when it's right in your face, you have to, when the rubber meets the road, you really have to decide. And I decided incorrectly to believe that abortion was the answer to my problem. And it wasn't the answer to my problem. So I drove from North Dakota to Minnesota to the clinic. And I had never driven on highways before, big highways. And I just remember driving to the abortion clinic and feeling like I was trapped, like I needed to do this, but I was terrified at the same time. And I remember being on 494 and I had a semi on one side and a semi on the other, and one in front of me and one behind me. And that was just such a picture of the trap I felt I was in. So I was, like I said, 18, ended up going to the abortion clinic. When I got to the clinic, it was a very clinical place. People were sitting around on plastic covered chairs. No one was really looking at anybody. We were all filling out paperwork. And as we filled out the paperwork, I think we kind of all just tried to pretend that nobody knew why we were there. But we know why we were there. So I filled out the paperwork, was called into this windowless door, and a lady said, "Come on back and we'll take care of you." And the counseling I received was, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And it was, of course, I was sure I wanted to do this because I was more afraid of leaving without having the procedure done than I was with having the procedure done. So I can still to this day remember the sounds and the smells of that room. And I can still remember the tugging that went on in my womb when they removed the baby from my womb. And the nurse was kind, and she said, "It'll be over soon." She patted my hand, and "It'll be over soon." And I just wanted to get out of there. And I strongly remember, this is so strange, I strongly remember that we went to Leanne Chin's afterwards for lunch. And I look back on that now and I think, you just took the life of your child and then you went to Leanne Chin's for lunch. What's wrong with this picture? So I thought that if I had this abortion, life would go back to normal for me. I could just go back, do everything I had planned, and life would be just fine. Well, it wasn't that way for me. I ended up getting very involved with drugs and alcohol. I wouldn't say I was addicted, but I was very involved with drugs and alcohol, and I started to become very promiscuous. Slept with a lot of different people, went off to college, didn't really go for education, just went to party. Don't do that, that's not a good idea. And when I was in school, I got pregnant again. And often people say, "Well, why didn't you use birth control?" And I think I didn't use birth control because I knew that abortion was an option, because I had chosen it before. So when I got pregnant the second time, it was a no-brainer for me. Just go get it taken care of, be done. So I did. I went to a different clinic this time, and this time I didn't cry. The nurse held my hand, but I didn't cry. I just couldn't wait to get it over with and get on with things. And sadly, a third pregnancy arose, and I went again to this other abortion clinic. And this time I was a little further along. The doctor that had done the second abortion was the same person that did the third one. And this time, as I was on the table, he showed me the results. Normally, the abortion just goes away through the suction tubing in this glass bottle underneath the table. But he evidently wanted me to deal with something. And so he just showed me, this is the result. I don't want to see you back here again. And in my crazy mind, I thought, who do you think you are? I'm a paying customer, and I can't believe you just showed me that. So I got out of there as fast as I could. In the parking lot, I lit up a cigarette, and as soon as I could, I found some marijuana and got good and drunk. And it was not a pretty picture. And so after I had that abortion, life just really went further down the tubes. I got involved with a guy who was very violent, and I got involved with other people along the way. And the further I got into the chaotic lifestyle, I had lost my job, I lost my car, someone borrowed it and wrecked it, and so I was in a pretty bad pickle, and I still hadn't dealt with anything of my past. So I had to move out of where I was living because I couldn't pay for that anymore. And before I moved out of where I was living, I found out I was pregnant again. And again, this was not good news. I was so angry. I just remember being so angry, and I got to find a way out of this because I just had to find a way out. And I had used abortion as a way out before, and it had seemed to work for me, even though it really wasn't working. So when I found out I was pregnant this time, I went to Wisconsin and I asked a friend if she had some money. Could she help me with the abortion? And she said, no, I just bought a washer and dryer, so I don't have any cash. And I was so angry. I just remember being so angry that I couldn't solve it, So I came back to a different city, and I knew one person living in the city. So I called and said, can I come and stay with you? You know, I had my car and about $20. I had gotten my car fixed, so I got that back, but I really was lost. So I started looking through the phone book, the old days where there was phone book, a big yellow phone book, and started calling through the phone book trying to find help. And I still remember standing in a Cub Foods lobby where they had the old payphone and put 25 cents in the payphone and call places. So I remember calling places and said, do you do abortions? You know, and the strangest thing was the one place I called, they said, do you have any collateral? And I thought, if I had collateral, I wouldn't be calling you, you know, but they wanted something down so that I could get the money for the procedure. I don't know if they do that anymore, but I was stuck. So I kept looking through the phone book, and I happened to run across Catholic Charities. And I contacted them and said, do you guys do abortions? I mean, I was pretty deluded at that time. And they said, no, but maybe we could help you with something called adoption. And honest to goodness, I had never considered adoption before. I just wanted to flee. I just wanted it to go away. And I never considered adoption. So I went in and talked with the social worker there. And I thought, well, surely she'll understand my long, sad story, and she'll give me a break, and she'll help me get out of this mess. Well, instead she said, you're a very angry young woman, and you need to get some help. And I told her what she could do with that, and I left, because in my mind, I was still in charge. You know, I hadn't, you know, I was still completely gonna do this. Well, when I went back to where I was staying, I started thinking about what she said, and she was right. I was a very angry young woman, and I needed a lot of help. And she made me slow down enough to start thinking about the other person involved in my crisis, and that was my unborn child. And that was the first time it hit me, there's somebody else in this picture. It's not just about me, it's somebody else in this picture. And talk about take a deep breath and be like, wow, could there be another way? Could there be something else? And there was, in fact, something else. So I began the process of thinking about making an adoption plan for my son. Even though I was 22, I knew that I was not ready to parent a child. I knew that that wasn't the path for me. I had, like the lady said, a lot of anger, lots of issues to deal with. And so as I began to carry my son, I began to think about what was best for him and what his needs were. And as I began to think about that, I began to feel really hopeful, like maybe this could be okay. I still had to deal with telling my family and all the things that came along with that, but I felt hopeful instead. I felt like I had a real choice. And when I found that real choice, I began to plan. And as I began to plan, I began to feel strong and I began to feel courageous and I began to feel like I can do this. So I found a family for my son. And in March, when he was born, I made an adoption plan for him. And his adoptive mom was my labor companion, and she held him even before I did. And we're still very good friends to this day. And I'm so thankful that I chose adoption instead of abortion for this baby. After my second abortion, I think I really got depressed and I got really angry, but I didn't know why I was angry. And I used drugs and alcohol to kind of numb me at that point. And it's pretty, when you have a trauma in your life, it's kind of like when you have a beach ball and you hold it under the water for a long time. You can do it for a while, but eventually when you let go of that beach ball, it just goes flinging into the air. And I think the drugs and alcohol were a way for me to kind of assuage what was happening, and the men and the whatever. It was just a way to avoid dealing with the fact that I had taken the lives of my children. And I became very stridently pro-choice. I became very angry if anyone talked about it. A lot of denial, a lot of, I can't believe those people would think they have a say in what anybody does. So when I began to, so I'll start over. So after I released my son for adoption, I went kind of back out into my old life, but I still wasn't healed. I wasn't done with the fact that I had taken the lives of 3 of my children. Even though I gave birth to my son, I was not done with that part. And actually, in fact, when I gave birth to him, I hemorrhaged very badly. And the doctor said that was because I had a lot of scar tissue from the abortions. I don't have any medical documentation about that, but they had to rush me back into recovery and keep me from hemorrhaging. I lost 1,500 cc's of blood in just a heartbeat. So I was very grateful that I was alive. But I still hadn't changed my heart. And that was another chapter to learn about. So I met a wonderful guy. He started talking to me about God. And I thought, how could God love me? How could he care about me? I'm not worthy of it. I'm not worthy of it. And he shared with me Romans, where it says that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And he also shared with me that there's no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. And I thought, could that be possible? And even though I didn't feel like I was worthy to be forgiven, I knew I needed to be forgiven. And as I began to kind of peel back those layers of all the years, I began to understand that God's love and his mercy and his grace was available to me. Even though I had callously taken the lives of my 3 children, I knew that God loved me and I knew that I could be forgiven. I found in Isaiah it says, though your sins are as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are red like crimson, they shall be as wool. And God says, come now, let us reason together. Let me talk to you, daughter. Let me talk to you about your sin. But also let me talk to you about Jesus. Let me talk to you about my son who came to redeem you and to save you and to clean your heart up. And I learned about Jesus, and I came to know and understand that God did love me, and that no matter what I had done, when I yielded to him, I could be saved and I could have my sins forgiven. And I call my story God's Amazing Grace, because he really did shown me incredible grace and incredible mercy. I went on to marry the guy who shared Christ with me, and God allowed me to have 2 more children, which I find incredibly amazing. I know that doesn't always happen for people. I would say I feel like life came forth from a place where death had previously reigned, both in my heart and in my womb. And that to me is an incredible gift of God's mercy to me. When I talk to people who are thinking about abortion, or when I meet other women who have had abortions, it always stuns me that they weren't given many choices, or that they didn't feel like they had any choices. And women in Minnesota deserve choices. They deserve better choices than to take the life of their child. There's so many resources for people to get help. In fact, am involved with an organization that helps people. In fact, just today, I met with a young woman who chose life for her child many months ago and came in to share that little guy's picture with us. And we gave her a car seat for that little baby. And so just so many beautiful things. Life comes forth from a place where death had previously reigned. And I'm grateful for that. I think for myself, I always felt that abortion would be like an eraser. Like it would just erase that I was pregnant, erase that baby. And it did erase that baby from the face of this earth, but that baby is still in God's mind, in God's heart. So it's not an eraser when you choose abortion, because you always know that you were the mother of a child that's deceased. So different people have different reactions to abortion. I've met many people who have said, oh, abortion was the best thing I ever did for myself. I've met women who have grieved into their 60s after they had an abortion in their 20s. So everybody's different. But the similarity is that in our hearts, we know that we took the life of our child. And I think it's important, too, to remember that I think in our conversations over the past few months, as Roe has been overturned, people want to lump abortion into one thing, but it's not. It's very nuanced. It's very different. We can't lump a miscarriage in the same category as an induced abortion because we just don't want to be pregnant. And I think we have to be really careful with that and not do that. Women who have abortions have regret. We have trauma because we took the lives of our children. Sometimes we can bury it. Sometimes it comes up right away. I think one of the interesting things about abortion clinics is that they ask after the abortion right away, how are you feeling? Well, most people after a trauma and something that's over, they'll say, I feel great. I feel wonderful. I'm glad it's over. But they don't talk to them years later, 5 years later, 10 years later. One of my friends once said, it takes 5 or 10 minutes to choose abortion, but it takes a lifetime to get over it. And she's so right. Even though I know I'm forgiven, even though I know that Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins and that I'm completely forgiven, I had years of difficulty. It affected the way I raised my children. It affected the way I interacted with my husband as a partner in life. It affected the way I think in my head. I had to completely change the way I was after it. I don't know for me if it was about trust so much as it was about I found out just how prideful and how self-sufficient I thought I was. So for me, I didn't have so much trouble trusting other people, but I did have trouble trusting myself with decisions going forward. So the decisions that I made going forward, I would say I didn't trust myself. Having 3 abortions caused me not to be able to trust my own decision making and trust myself. And it was a real difficulty there. I always had to was always second guessing what I was doing. Is this the right decision? Isn't that not the right decision? So it did affect my trust in myself. One of the things that I experienced when I was in that unplanned pregnancy situation was fear. And fear really drove the choices that I made. And I fully believe that the enemy wants us to live in fear. And I find it very interesting in our culture right now, where the baby has become something to fear instead of something to love, which is what God created us as women, to love our children. But there's been this animus between the mother and the child now that I think is a direct result of abortion being so common in our culture today. And at what point did the baby become the enemy of a woman and the enemy of a family? And where does that come from? I think that comes straight from the pit of hell. Someone once said that life can be the same after losing a trinket, but not after losing a treasure. And I lost 3 treasures when I aborted my children in search of my own self-fulfillment. But I gained the greatest treasure of all when I came to know Jesus as my Savior. And what a gift that is. And if God can save me, He can save anybody. So I want people to know that no matter what your background is, no matter what your past is, that the arms of God are open wide to you and that you can have the grace and mercy that's offered to you through Jesus.